Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It is a winter season, it's cold outside. I don't know if you already had your first snow. I didn't. I am eagerly awaiting snow. I think it's super nice. I love the season. I love all the Christmas markets, everything around it. Spiced wine, hanging out in like Christmas markets themselves. I have one, a very popular one and very big one right around the corner, which I visit fairly often. And I just love that season. But with this season, obviously it's getting cold and we have to wear suitable clothes. So I figured, especially since last week's episode was a lot of work, we're going to do something a little less intense this week. We're going to make turtleneck jumpers, and I have a few things already prepared because I kind of was super excited and did it my thing without really recording everything. I recorded a few videos, and which I'm going to show you as well because you liked that version, that sneak peek of the jumper that I posted on Instagram very much. So obviously I'm going to include that not only in this video but obviously also in the pattern of this week's project, which you can get through the link down in the description below. So if you're interested, go check that out. Also, before we start, if you haven't already, go and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you will get notified every time that I post. I am on the road to 100k. I know there's still 13k or something left, but it would be the greatest present to just get the 100k full before the end of the year. That would be my goal of 2022. I don't know if it's going to be possible, but if you want to support me and my channel, just hit subscribe down below. That would be amazing, and thank you very much. So now let's start with the video. I have this beautiful rayon fine rib jersey right here. It's a 1x1 rib, and I already started laying out my pattern and also cutting it out. I have obviously also my front and back piece right here, and since the front and the back only get cut out once, I am starting with my sleeve. Usually I don't show you how I cut stuff out because it's not really interesting, I feel like, but for this, because you only do one of front and back, I figured I'm going to show you how I do this. I also only cut out 5mm seam allowance for knits because I tend to use my overlock to sew the pieces together, and my overlock just uses a seam allowance of 5mm. That's why I have that considered when cutting out my pattern. Just wanted to point that out. Obviously you can use your normal machine with a zigzag stitch, or if you don't have that option, you can also stretch and sew with a very small stitch on your normal machine, which is also what I will be doing for parts of this project. So now that I have my sleeve cut out, I'm going to open my fabric up. And that's why I like to do the sleeve first, because then I still have both layers on top of each other nicely. And now I can just simply cut out my back and front piece out of the remaining pieces. And this piece specifically has different fronts and backs because the sleeve cutout, the armhole, is different in front and back pieces. So as you can see here, this is the back piece. It's pretty straight, whereas here in the front piece, it's very curvy, and that just makes a nicer shape in the front. And now here, out of the remaining piece here, I can just cut out my front. What I always like to start with is putting the shoulder seams together. So I take my front and back pieces and lay them right sides together and close the shoulder seams before I do anything else. I don't start with the side seam, I don't start with anything else but the shoulder seam, because as you already know if you watch my other videos, I don't like to close my side seam until after the sleeve is sewn into the armhole. That just makes everything so much easier because you have more space, frankly. So the first thing that I will be doing is close the shoulder seam right here before we put the armhole in place. And I do that with my normal machine, my industrial machine, which cannot do a zigzag. I only have a straight stitch, which is totally fine, because if you only have that possibility of stitching, which is usually not an elastic stitch, you can use a small stitch. I use a stitch length of 2 and just stretch your seam a tiny bit while you're sewing. That prevents any ripping or whatsoever, because the seam is more elastic than if you wouldn't do any of that, or if you'd use a larger stitch. So that's what I will be doing, and then I will be overlocking that seam. You can also just overlock it if you have your overlock setting for the needle set to very tightly, because an overlocked seam usually is not made to hold seams. It's just to prevent fraying, basically. So it's not a very strong seam. So do your tryouts and like see if that actually holds shape or if it holds together. If it doesn't do that, please do a normal stitch with your zigzag stitch or a straight stitch, as I just said, and then overlock, just to prevent anything from ripping. This is what it looks like now. As you can see, I overlocked it as well. Now, one thing that I like to do after I overlocked to prevent any fraying, I am using synthetic thread for my overlock machine. So I just like to melt the ends just to keep it from fraying. So you don't need to do much. You just need to like melt it a tiny bit and then just carefully, to not burn yourself, flatten it out, and that way it just doesn't open up. Obviously you can always do like the method of pulling it through the seam back, or whatever you prefer. This is just for me the quickest and best option, so that's what I like to do. Now that we have the shoulder seam closed, we can go ahead and open up the armhole. I like to put right sides up, and the seam allowance should face towards the back. You see the back is not as curvy as the front armhole. Now I have on my pattern, I will have the indicators to check whether you use the correct sleeve with the back and the front armhole written on it. And now if you put right sides together, you can check your shoulder point that needs to match up with the seam right here. Make sure not to cut too far. I cut pretty far, considering I only have 5mm seam allowance, so be careful when doing that, like cutting into your notch, to just not do too much as I just did here. And then you can match up the underarm point here if you want to with a needle on both sides, and also sew this and then overlock this. Now that the sleeves are in, I'm actually going to iron the seam allowance of the armhole right here into the sleeve. It lays way better that way, and it just looks very professional from the outside, so when you wear it. So let's quickly do this. Especially the shoulder area, I like to press from the outside again, just to make sure that it lays how I wanted it to lay, because it just tends, as it is a very curvy seam when it's worn, the seam allowance just tends to bubble up a tiny bit. That's why I like to press it again from the outside. And now we can go ahead and close the side seams. So I'm just putting right sides together now, and the side seams go from the hem of the piece over the armhole towards the hem of the sleeve. And you can sew it from the hem towards the sleeve in one go. Now we can go ahead and already turn this piece right sides out, and depending on your fabric, this is already done. Now what I mean by that is, because we haven't finished the edges on the hem of the sleeves, the actual hem of the piece and the neck, it depends on the fabric whether it is a fraying fabric, like it tends to fray, or whether it doesn't fray. Because knits, or especially elastic fabrics, obviously you can make this without having a knit per se, you just need an elastic fabric. So you can also just use any synthetic elastic or nylon or whatever you have, if it is elastic, you know. With knits and also elastic fabrics generally, you can't really say that they fray or they don't fray. It's very dependent on the fabric, the specific fabric that you use. So for me, for example, this doesn't really fray. It frays because it is a knit. It will over time fray. So as you can see here, if I just pull on it, you see that the actual loops, they just go down as you know of knits. So I will have to finish this. If your fabric doesn't do that, or if you don't care, you don't need to finish the edges. I will do that though. And I just like to do a somewhat of a lettuce seam, as I don't really have the color of the fabric that I am using as overlock thread. I am using white at the moment. I will be overlocking my neck, but then I will be folding it down and top stitching it with a small stitch, just so that I don't have this weird white border around my neck or my sleeve hem. I will probably do the lettuce seam without folding it on my hem, as I intend to wear it in jeans anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me if the white border is visible there. But obviously you can do whatever finish you like. It is your design and you are free to decide what to do with yours. And now with the top stitches in place, this is what it looks like. Same to the sleeve hem. And as I said, I did the lettuce seam on the actual hem of the jumper, and that is already it. It was super quick, super easy to sew. Now, I didn't have this jumper with me when I was shooting it yesterday because I just made it. So you're not gonna see this specific one in the end of this video, but I'm just quickly going to put it on for you guys so you can see how it looks like worn. But I used exactly the same pattern for the blue and the gold version, so this is like my third one that I made. I'm really happy with it, and it's super quick as well. So let's just put this on really quickly. And this is what it looks like worn. I love this color so much, and the fit of this jumper, at least to me, it looks super elegant and flattering. So I really enjoy this pattern, and I've made so many of these already because that's my go-to if you want to look like somewhat elegantly. Put a jumper like this on and you're good to go. So this is what it looks like. As I said, I will show you a different color in the end of this video, but a very special version of this jumper is the next one that I will be showing you. I did a swirly kind of pattern on Wednesday, and I was like kind of filming it while I was doing so without commenting on it because I was just so involved in the creative process. But obviously I'm going to share that process with you as well. I'm going to talk you through the method that I was using, and I'm not going to show you a specific pattern that I made. I will share the one that I ended up using with this pattern as well, but I will show you the method that I use so you can actually make any pattern that you like by yourself. And for that, we're actually doing a voiceover because my microphone was out of battery for this section of the video, and the paper pattern is just making so much noise, like you can barely listen to this clip here. So we're doing a voiceover, and I hope you're fine with that. So let's just say goodbye to my face. And for some reason, I was talking a lot about how to start, and it's just the easiest to start with your front piece. So draw out any shape that you like. Let's do the swirling pattern that I was talking about. Start with any shape, anywhere. I really liked the spot that I picked in my first design, so that's what I'm doing here as well. Let's pretend this is a white. As I said, copying the first design. The next organic shape is going to be pink. Then I'm drawing in another white, another pink, and I'm finishing off the hem with another white. Name them so that you don't get confused. So in my case, W for white, P for pink. I decided to do a pink back generally. Now, I'm docking on the side seam basically onto the front piece because towards the hem it is rather straight. I can just simply dock it on there. We only have that small white spot, so I only need to finish that organic shape, and I do that with this kind of circular shape. Now that was the easy side seam. Let's change it up for the other one. As you can see, there is a bit more going on. So remember, my back is pink, so I only have to finish the white spots, like this one down here, and then this rather large one here in the middle. Now, since the side seam curves there, I can first of all draw in the first line, but then I have to shift my front piece in order to get a smooth line once everything is sewn together. Once you have the start of both of these lines, you can draw in that circular shape, and the side seam is already done. Now, that part up here in the armhole is going to get finished with the sleeves, so that is not our concern yet. Let's do the neckline. The neckline will also get sewn together, front and back neckline that is. So we have another line that is marking the white border. The other side is ending in the neck itself, so I only have that one start. Since I don't have an ending, I need to also finish that white spot in the back in the neck, because I can't dock it on anywhere else. If I have a look at the other shoulder, there is only a pink spot there, so that smoothly integrates into the back piece. So the only option is to also end that shape in the neckline. So far so good. Let's continue with the armhole. We're going to continue with the more difficult armhole. Remember, I have pink as a base color, so I only need to finish the white. The back armhole does not have any white spots, only the front one does. So I only need to dock it onto the front armhole how it's going to end up getting sewn together and finish the shape in any form or shape that you like. You can do like a tube down the sleeve, you can do a spiral that ends in the side seam and then starts from the other side of the side seam. Again, you just have to think 3D. If you end it somewhere in any seam that gets attached to another seam, it has to continue from somewhere else. Apart from the neck, the sleeve hem, and the actual hem, everything is connected to another spot in the jumper. Moving on to the other sleeve, we actually don't have anything to do here, but if you had, you can just turn around your sleeve pattern in order to get, you know, the correct sleeve for your other armhole and do exactly the same method that I was showing you. In order to actually use this pattern that we now prepared, you have to cut out all of these panels, all of these shapes individually. Before you do that, draw in these lines throughout the whole pattern on every dividing seam, in every curve, everywhere, because this makes it so much easier to put everything back together. These are basically notches that you transfer onto your fabric with any dissolvable marker, and therefore you know which part goes onto which part. Since they curve the opposite ways, as you only have curved shapes, I mean, you do whatever you want, maybe you have squares, who knows. This makes it so much easier to actually put these pieces together. So that is my tip before you cut out your pattern or your individual shapes. Jumping back in time now, and we're actually working on the jumper that I was talking about. So as you can see here, I cut out my shapes in white and pink, and they curve super oppositely. So with these notches, I can now pin these together and match up the pattern perfectly. I think I might have such a hard time without these notches, so this is tremendously helpful, and I will be doing the rest of matching up while sewing. I overlocked the seam as well, and now I can go ahead and press it. I am pressing everything towards the outside, if that makes sense, as it just falls better and it's not gonna bubble up. I'm continuing now this method until I have my full front, and then obviously also full back and full sleeves, and then I can sew the pieces together just as I showed you in the very beginning of this video, and I have a very cool and special one-of-a-kind jumper. So I'm super happy with how this turned out, and I hope you enjoy the rest of me making this jumper. So I quickly wanted to say I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it wasn't quite as what you're used to, but it was fun to make, and I think the jumpers that I made because of this video were really worth it, and I really liked them, and I hope you do too. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sunday, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, go check out my Instagram or my Pinterest or my YouTube shorts. I do small tips and tricks throughout the whole week, all about my projects and so much more. So if you could just give me a follow there, that would be amazing. So thank you so much. And yeah, that's all. The link to the pattern with this specific swirly pattern that you see on screen right now will be in the description down below. And thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!